This is the Convene podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Convene Talk. My name is Maggie, Digital Media Editor. Curt, tell us more about the story that you selected for today's discussion.
All right. Hello. Thank you. I picked the Wall Street Journal story that we ran in News Junkie, and the Wall Street Journal's travel and business writers, I think, got together and asked the question, how early should you arrive for the busiest air travel day in U.S. history? This ran right before the 4th of July, but I think it applies at any time of the year and any flight of the year, because I think if anybody's like me, a lot of times how I used to be anyway, a lot of times they were very late to get to the airport and sometimes would miss a flight or would just get on the plane just in time and be all schwitzy and sweaty and not like in a state ready to travel and relax. And especially when you have long legs like I do and you can't fit in the seat anyway, and then you're trying to get in there at the last minute. But the reason I love the story is because they go through and they talk about that there's a baseline 90 minutes before a travel time or your boarding time is good for domestic departures. And then they go through all these different scenarios. If you have your mobile pass, you can subtract 20 minutes. If you're traveling at peak time, add 30 minutes. If you're at a major airport, add 20, so on and so forth. And so I just thought this was interesting because everybody has their own formula, I think. Like I have a friend who likes to get there, swear to God, 2 hours before, and will do it every time, and just wants to get acclimated. And I'm doing air quotes right now because she, I don't know, she just likes to be relaxed and just sit there. And my problem with that is that I'd probably fall asleep and miss my flight in a different way. But ever since United started giving me free passes to the United Club, I actually get there early now because I go to the United Club and have breakfast for free. And the weird thing is they don't have very good coffee there. They don't have any special coffees. They have a full bar at 8 a.m. in the morning, but no lattes or things like that. But they have lots of good food. So I have started going early, I should admit. But I just want to hear what you guys do, and maybe this gets other people talking about what the good ideas are to like what time they should be there and that they should change their own way of traveling. So who wants to jump in?
I'll say that I used to, I had in my mind, okay, so my flight is at this time. I knew which airport I was going to, and then I would say, oh, I have to leave 2.5 hours early, whatever. Now I push that because I do like to give myself an extra cushion of time. I feel like why would I like push myself to the limit to just make the flight? It's like it really doesn't make sense. So I probably err on the side of your friend. That really works against me when the flight is delayed because then you're just like cooling your heels for hours. I don't get into the club, any of the clubs. So I'm with everybody at the gate, just sitting there. And so that is like that just happened the last time when I traveled to Edgecon, where my flight was delayed for 2 hours. So I was actually sitting there for almost 4 hours waiting for my flight, and that was annoying. But still, to me, better than sprinting across the airport, trying desperately to get to the gate in time to make a flight. And that has happened a lot. It's very stressful. I don't need that to start my travel. And when you live in a very busy area like I do in the New York area, you just really, there's no accounting for traffic. There's just no, you can use all of the technology you want, but once you get on the road, something happens and then you're sunk. So you need to allow extra time. I think for me, one of the most stressful things is ending at an event is ending and figuring out how much time I need to allow to get to the airport in a city I'm not familiar with. Like, what's the airport going to be like? How much time should I allow? What's the traffic like in this destination? I think that's something people in our industry tend to forget. Like, Like that's an unknown, I think, and it's an anxiety producing thing when you're at an event and you're like figuring out, okay, I have to leave. Am I going to make it to the last session? Do I have extra time? Because you're just not familiar at all with your destination. So I think that if there were like tools to help people at events figure that out, it would take some of the anxiety away. An anxious traveler. It could be other people are just like, yeah, I'll get there when I get there and they'll be fine.
Right. Even TSA pre-check in some places is not what it is in others. I mean, it
Right.
takes long. Some places don't even like it's the regular line almost sometimes. And so
And
you have
sometimes
to
it's
wait.
longer. Sometimes it's
Yeah.
longer than the regular line.
Yeah.
Right. Because
Yeah.
a lot of people have TSA pre-check. So yeah, you don't know. I usually ask when I'm in a destination, like how much time at the hotel, how much time should I allow for travel? And at this time of day, what's the airport like? Just to get insider information. Barbara, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever checked my bag at an event venue on the last day thinking I'll get it before the airport because I just don't have any confidence that I'll be able to get my bag in time to go to the airport. I always leave it at the hotel and go back because I just see that just sea of suitcases and think and for all I know it might work perfectly well and that would save me time. It would be smart, but I'm kind of anxious about that. Where I find I think a lot more that I didn't used to is connecting flights. I find that there's so many more delays that are not weather related, that are staff related. And so I feel like more than it more than it used to be, knowing how the apps work that can rebook you when you get to an airport and find out that your connecting flight has been canceled. And, just that has become a much more important thing when I choose an airline because some airlines are more seamless than others on taking care of you. So I just feel like it used to be weather and then traffic on your way to the airport. And now I do think just the internal workings of the airline, their ability to match up the different legs and get you there that's added another element of like, oh, I look at this flight carefully and think about the airport. Is that really enough time to make that flight? So that's an added thing I think about. What are you thinking, Jen?
I was just agreeing with you in my mind. I think the layover is such a pain point, especially internationally. You really have to be strategic about how much time to give yourself, where you're going, specifically if you're going from, if you have multiple connections abroad, or if it's a connection that's taking you home. And there's so many things to think about in terms of luggage and time and lounges and all of that. But one of the things that I was thinking about is, I feel like we're in an era where, I mean, travel is like the airports are maxed out in the US. I feel like domestically things are a mess. Like our infrastructure has not really kept up with the passenger traffic. I mean, we're starting to see some new airports and some big airport renovations that are amazing. Specifically thinking of like Salt Lake City, I went through last year. My own home airport, Charleston International, has done an amazing job. But it's still, I think, a big part of the problem is, US at least, we're so behind in terms of our infrastructure. But when I travel internationally, I find most of the time, depending on where I am, if I'm someplace like Singapore, which is an airport I went through last month, it's so much more efficient. And it's because they've incorporated AI and other technology to really speed the process along. I mean, I went through Singapore airport, I think 3 times, just because it was a multi-destination trip. And every time was so efficient and seamless. I had a couple layovers there, and I gave myself like 4 hours, which I so did not need. I mean, I still had a ball because it's Singapore airport. There's so much to do. and I had lounge access and needed a shower anyway. But I think that's looking ahead. I was actually listening to a podcast yesterday, kind of touched on this topic. It was Pivot podcast, which I'll will provide a link if anyone's curious. But it was with Scott Galloway and Kara Swisher, and they were talking about airports and AI and travel, and they had an aviation reporter from CNN on it, and I just like nerded out on my walk last night listening to it because it talked all about how there's a lot of innovation out there that's going to speed up that process and make it a lot more seamless. And it's already kind of started to roll. I don't know if you all have seen, but like there's been, if you have global entry, for example, now you don't even need to it used to be you'd walk up to a kiosk, you'd slide your passport into the machine and it would take a photo of you, and it took a couple minutes, still amazing and super efficient. You skip the line. Now I walk up, it takes a picture of my face. I never even had to get out of my passport, and I walk through quicker than the pilots half the time if the pilots don't have it. It's incredible, and I feel like that's coming. I'm hoping that gets applied to just our regular domestic security when you go through TSA. So from this podcast I listened to, I felt like it gave me a little bit of hope, like it's coming. But as we know, our airports and just generally in the US are kind of slow to adopt, just bureaucracy and red tape. But yeah, I think that's part of the problem. Like if you don't have pre-check, you don't have clear. I have all of those plus, whatever I can possibly get from the airline, because the airlines too sometimes will speed things up. Like Delta has facial recognition now. Without that, it's just such a painful process. Maggie, what are you thinking?
Well, I'm thinking how much anxiety I have when I come over to the US because I'm not familiar with all the things you describe. And I don't have all those pre-check. I've actually looked into them and they're not applicable for foreigners. So it's like, great, thank you very much. So it's really for me that's anxiety producing. I mean, traveling within the EU, it's very easy for me. I'm not sure if you all have the same experience. Maybe Curt can share something about that. So you mentioned connecting flights, and I actually know of some airlines here in Europe where they give you actually 2 short connections at certain airports. Like you cannot make the connection, but they still sell you the flight.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so upset every time. So I now know, and I just don't book those flights.
Yeah.
But if you're
I always check
international,
the
how would you
airport.
know?
Checking the airport website, like a lot of times, yeah, I don't understand why they allow those to be sold. But if you check the airport website, a lot of times it will tell you like how much time you need. Like London's really good about that actually. LHR, like because I went through there last month and I felt like it actually tells you like a realistic time frame. But you're right. Like if you're not super well traveled, you may not know that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with what Michelle said. When you're in unfamiliar place, you don't know. You rely on locals to tell you how early to go, what to expect. But then I've been in a situation where different people that are local tell me different estimates. So you kind of, and actually neither would apply to me because I'm not local. So I don't hold a local passport. So it would be a completely different story. And I've ended up almost missing my flight because of listening to advice. So that I think it's very important for international travelers going to
Yeah.
events, just providing that information, making sure your delegates know what to expect and how to plan for that, because it's a huge pain point. And then it's the end of the event, so that's how people would often remember your events, like the dessert food event. Barbara, what's on your mind?
Well, I wanted to ask you, Maggie, I'm really curious what has been your experience getting through customs here? Because when I lived in New York and arrived home, I was just appalled at the hall that was filled with people waiting to get through US customs who were international travelers. It just was so discouraging looking. And I just wondered about your experience, if that was.
It is the case.
Yeah.
I'm always planning for extra time there, and I've had instances where I've waited for a couple of hours to go through all this immigration. Also, people are not very nice there.
Yeah.
I mean, the staff, they're just, I get it, they're overworked and everything. You also have this kind of a hurdle that once you wait, you go through all these nerve-wracking experiences because, right, is the police there looking at you very, very badly. They are asking you all these questions and you're coming off of a very long flight. So you're like, oh my God, I'm not even sure where I am right now. And you're asking me about how many days and where exactly I'm going to go and like my detailed agenda. And then you have to actually go and fetch your luggage. If you have checked luggage, then you have to actually check it in again, probably go through another set of checks on the bag and have, people open it, look at it, all these kinds of things. So the fact that people are not nice, it makes it
Yeah.
so much more anxiety inducing experience because you're tired and you feel miserable and then you feel attacked pretty much. And yeah, I understand they have to be strict and I mean, all kinds of people are entering and there's all kinds of situations, but at least some empathy. No, not too much, but
Yeah.
some empathy is going to be very nice.
Yeah, they don't have to be
Maggie,
mean.
Maggie, do you have an e-passport? Do you know if they're so
Yeah, I do.
has that helped or have you been able to use those lanes?
Not in the US. I mean, in
No?
Europe, yeah, I can go and just scan my passport, but not in the US. No, because I have visa, I have to have my visa checked. But by the way,
Okay.
having said all these things that are, when you enter the country, living the country is like a piece of cake. Even in Europe, it's not that easy to leave a country. They're like, just go. It's fine. We don't even need to check your bag. We don't care. Go board your flight. And I've always been thinking like, it's still an international flight. So you have to be a bit more diligent checking people and what they're bringing onto that flight because, I mean, we know stories, right? So I've been curious about that, but it is what it is. Curt, what about you? How is your experience in Europe?
It's been all right. I was going to ask you though, when you are flying, well, first of all, when you come home, it's pretty easy, right? After you have gone through everything else before that. But when you get home and land and you're there, everything's pretty easy. And it's pretty easy for you to go from place to place within Europe. How much time do you give yourself then?
Not much to go to the airport. I
Yeah.
mean, for me, it is an international flight. I would rarely take a domestic flight in such a small country as ours. So for me, it would always be an international flight that I have, to consider. So I would go just a couple of hours before. Also, the airport here is not that big. I mean, in my worst scenario, I went 3 hours before, but the weather was horrific and the airport was a nightmare. And I actually had to run to make it to my flight. But it has happened just once. And it was after Christmas and New Year, so it was in early January. Usually early January is not a fun time to travel.
Yeah, here, the first time I think I went pretty early because I didn't know, I didn't know what it was going to be. But the second time I didn't go that much earlier because I found out that with my residence permit, I can just pretty much go through too. It's almost like I have a EU pass or something. But mostly, like in the trains are even easy. I mean, it's just so easy to take a train if you know where you're going on the train. I went early for my train too, and I was super bored. It was not a good idea to do that, but I was worried I wouldn't find the right platform. But yeah, I've had some issues. Like there's a certain airport in London that I spent a lot of time at for no reason when I was going to convening leaders. And so I always try to fly through Copenhagen because that's my favorite airport and they take good care of you there. And I always try to do like 5-hour layover just because I can go shopping because it's like a giant mall and it's awesome. But yeah, I had really bad experience in London a couple times. But other than that, I mean, getting on the plane is easy. Getting on the plane here and getting there and everything is pretty easy. Plus the subway's so easy to get from place to place here. So that's always a cinch. It doesn't take much time.
I'm going to just jump in there about Copenhagen just because this will be in tomorrow's News Junkie, which is Copenhagen's new sustainability push is free coffee for tourists. So they are working with the tourism office is offering perks for visitors who pick up trash or take public transportation. And they're working with different businesses that offer free coffee. Starting July 15th, they'll earn a gift of appreciation. Could be coffee, a kayak rental, Danish pastry.
I love that.
Which I love that too.
Yeah.
I can't wait to read that because I'd love to see what they mean about picking up trash.
I don't. You
Like,
can
do you being able
collect
to bring a
plastic.
bag of trash to the airport?
It says, for instance, you can collect plastic trash and turn it into jellyfish art at a workshop run by the National Gallery of Denmark.
Oh,
So it's not like they like you
they're
bring
not
to
going
them
to
and
give
say,
you a
hey,
vest and a big bag.
and a picker. No, they're not going to do that. I guess you have to participate in this jellyfish art project. But if you ride a bike, you take public transportation, you can receive 20 extra minutes of ski time on
How
Copenhagen,
would you
which
ride a
is
bike to an airport with your luggage, though?
no, I think once you're in the destination, once you arrive and you're a tourist, I don't,
It's
you know,
a backpack.
I see. I was like,
they expect you to carry, take a bike and carry your suitcase on your back.
that's impressive.
I just want to make a plug for the San Francisco airport. I don't know if anyone's ever spent time there, but they are super efficient. And I'm always wish that I had more time there because they have art exhibits. They have wonderful places to work. The Oakland airport's much closer to me, but there's always a little payoff if I can't get a flight locally and I can go to SFO. And particularly in the Harvey Milk Terminal, there's like a yoga studio. There's just lots of fun stuff there.
For convening gators, I connected through SFO. And I remember you saying that there's art exhibits and such a fun airport. And I looked and there was nothing in the terminal where I was locked because I was in the international terminal. I was like, that's just so sad because I had
Yeah.
That's the
Maybe
worst
they'll
when
iron that
airports
out.
don't allow you to move between terminals, especially for you. If you're traveling on a visa, it's not like you can slip in and out of passport control and customs easily. I did that on my last trip, but it was very easy for me to do so because we had, visa reciprocity or the visa waiver program. But yeah, that's the worst when you're trapped in a crappy terminal.
This is a few years ago. I had a flight that was changed from one terminal to the next. I had already gone through security at one terminal. So I had to go to another terminal, go through security, and I was flagged for things that I wasn't flagged for in the first terminal. And I said that to them. I said, but I was just through security in terminal A, and it wasn't a problem. They said, well, that was terminal A. This is terminal B. Same airport. I was same TSA. I don't understand.
What'd you pick up on the way?
Like nothing. It was just scrambling to get to my flight because they changed terminals at the last minute, which is crazy.
By the way, I wanted to mention something that was in the story. It was the last point that they made about being in a wheelchair and that you actually had to add 90 minutes. Nothing else added you so many minutes like a wheelchair. And I wish Casey was here so she could talk about it because she also did recently a story about the Disability Pride Month and what Indy Airport did with the artists and the displays they did with art from people with disabilities, which I think was fantastic. I hope they did more than just the art exhibit and they're actually trying to improve on their services for people in wheelchair or with other kinds of disabilities. But this just made me sad.
Yeah, my mom uses a wheelchair in the airport, and she's actually had really good experiences. I know this is just her experience, but I'm sure other people can speak to this. I think some airlines are better than others. So when she was coming to visit me before they moved here, she would only fly Delta, and she would have to connect in Atlanta, which everyone knows I actually love Atlanta Airport. I find it to be very efficient, but a lot of people hate it. It's very controversial. But actually, I don't think she ever had a bad experience. She flew up here and back to Florida several times in the past few years. It actually made it more efficient. There were times when she had a tighter connection, like under an hour, and they were actually really good about getting her off the plane first. If I think, they had to really rush it, they would put her on one of the carts that like takes you to between the terminals, depending on how close the terminal was. I think that really has more to do with Delta. I think Delta's customer service is like up here. Like, it's amazing how far they've come in 20 years. I don't know that the same could be said for other airlines and other airports, but I can report that Delta did a stellar job with my mom.
Jen, you're reminding me, I flew home injured, and I was so impressed with the flight attendants. Like, they were great. Like, they upgraded my seat. They brought me ice packs that they made in the galley. I feel like it was almost like they had something real to do, not just having people arguing about what kind of snack they wanted. I felt like I was very impressed with every part of the experience of getting home.
What airline was that?
Well, I was on a Delta flight, and we were sitting on the tarmac, and they canceled the flight while we were on the tarmac, and we went back in, and I got on a Frontier flight. And both sets of flight attendants were just absolutely fantastic.
That's good. That's
Yeah.
not fun flying injured. I'm sure that made it a lot.
Yeah, and I didn't really
easier.
realize I was injured till I got to the airport. So it was great. I was like, okay.
Yeah, that is the thing that you have to like pre-book the wheelchair or any type of assistant. I mean, it's really easy to do with Delta. Like, I helped my mom do that, but I have no idea how other airlines work, but
Did you get there really early because of that?
Me?
No, Jen, did you go
Jen.
really early with your mom? Like
I
this
actually
says
didn't
to
go
go
with
90
her.
minutes.
I was not with her for any of these flights, which made me terrified. But so I would drop her off at my airport. This is when she was coming to look at houses to buy here. But no, I really didn't drop her off earlier. I think, and I don't think she got there any earlier. I actually like put her through really fast. You actually, when you arrive, and she can walk. It's not like she can't walk, but she would walk up to the desk and say, "Hi, I booked the wheelchair like assistant service. I forget what it's called exactly." And they come out and she sits down in the wheelchair, and literally from that moment, she doesn't have to worry about walking. She just has issues with stability and can't walk very far. So she really didn't have to worry beyond that. But I think they got her through really quickly because she's in a wheelchair. Again, that's just her experience. But I never heard her say anything bad. There was a couple times I traveled with her and she used the wheelchair service, and what I saw was great. So, but yeah, didn't have to get there any earlier. But I think the point they made in the article was that on crazy travel days, because there are so many people, there might be fewer people to actually, provide the wheelchair service, which is a good point. I'm not sure that she traveled on a crazy travel day. I can't remember, but yeah.
And for our listeners that got to this point, you get links to everything we mentioned in the show notes. Don't forget to subscribe and share the podcast. Also, on social media, we had a call. If you want us to address a specific topic or you have a question to us, industry related, of course, just don't hesitate to send us your questions. Look up social media, send us an email. We're easy to reach. And then we'll address it in a future episode. And with that thought, until next time.